journalism has failed technology. Like I have been on the inside of multiple companies working at them where I would see pieces come out in big newspapers and I would read it and be like, this is literally not true. Or this is like the most bad faith, distorted version of the truth that you could possibly imagine. If I'm trying to build trust with a technologist, you got to start with your critique is fair and your critique is real. The journalism industry writ large has failed in many ways. The hope is that I individually can be different.
We only know things together. Even people in history who seem like such thinkers were building on like at least previous people, creating these like psychological barriers of distrust, linguistic barriers, like aggressively building different jargon for group signaling. They are very counterproductive. These like little bridges are so important between the tech and the cultural worlds because otherwise neither party benefits. Welcome back everybody to the Hope Axis. I'm here with Jasmine Sun today, who should have been on this podcast basically in every episode, being one of my favorite people when it comes to hope in technology and culture. Jasmine, you're both a writer and you lead writing communities. You speak to so many writers. Until last year, you even worked at Substack and actively kind of hands-on helped writers. When it comes to AI and how it might affect creativity and the tools of creativity, what were some of the most common questions that you heard from the writers?
That's a good question. I don't think that we got a ton of questions about AI specifically when we were at Substack. But what we saw was more writers expressing to each other anxieties about whether Substack would end up prioritizing AI writing or people producing AI slop would end up taking over the platform. I suppose there is sort of the normal concerns about social media algorithms and that style of AI, but in terms of LLMs and generative AI, I think writers knew that they had a more special and more unique voice. The concern was more coming from a distrust of tech companies not to throw that human creativity aside. And at Substack, we always had a pretty clear philosophy around AI, which is that we want to use AI to automate all of the rote work because we do believe in human creativity. And so in terms of the product, I was a product manager there. Our uses of AI were things like, can you auto-generate a transcript from a podcast episode? Or, can you pick out some 2-minute clips from a longer video that you can post to social media? These are tasks that we felt okay about using generative AI to support because it's all about amplifying and supplementing the main work that writers do rather than at all trying to replace the substance of a human voice with an AI voice.
That's so interesting. But it's also interesting how the writers would talk to each other about you as opposed to you
Oh
because
yeah.
like they don't know
It's
how.
like on Substack Notes, right? Like we
Yeah.
have the social media feed, like this community, which is just writers talking to each other. And so like when I log on every day, I'm seeing people like express all of their worries and their suspicions. Sometimes even like almost like conspiratorially about like, oh yeah, Substack is definitely gonna like sell out to Facebook next year. They're gonna do this. They're gonna pivot to AI. And I'd read it and be like, I get why people don't trust tech companies all the time. Like there have been a lot of platforms that have screwed over writers trying to build their businesses. But it was also kind of amusing because I'd read this stuff and be like, yeah, we do not plan on doing any of that.
That is kind of adorable and hilarious and so human. It's so interesting to me because, like myself, you are also a writer primarily. If I understand correctly, that's kind of the cornerstone of your identity in society and as a person, as a thinker. But you also help other people to get better, be better, grow faster. And so you're kind of on both teams here, right? You want to basically translate the knowledge of the backstage processes to the writers who are technically your colleagues so that they cooperate, that they can use whatever you are building to their best benefit. I mean, Substack Notes are a great example of a tool that, authors who successfully adopted a good kind of cadence on notes grow like crazy. And so,
Yeah.
it's and in those moments you really feel that okay, these like little bridges are so important between the tech and the cultural worlds because otherwise neither party benefits.
Yeah, I think like I do consider myself, in spite of everything, more of a techno optimist than a lot of folks in the creative community because there are platforms like Substack, but also like others that feel to me like they actually have managed to align the incentives of like business incentives with actually doing better and sustaining better creative work. And for decades before Substack existed, people were blogging every day for free, right? Like people were producing all this incredible intellectual work that people would say, like, your essay, your blog post changed my life. And they wouldn't get paid a dime for it. And like that just does feel so unfair. And we were seeing pre-Substack sort of the traditional media ecosystem collapse because its business models just weren't sustainable. And so I think a lot of what my role was when I was there, and even now many of the conversations I have with other writers are about how to think about technology in a more nuanced way. One is that is not purely adversarial, but that can recognize when there are opportunities to cooperate with technologies, to cooperate with, market incentives to actually motivate even better creative work. Because I think people, especially writers, especially creatives, have this default suspicion of algorithms, of business, of all of this stuff. But also everyone's got to make a living, right? And so, a lot of what I'd be doing is saying, like, I get that we don't trust social media because on Twitter and LinkedIn, if you post a link, that might get downranked because the link will take you off the platform and they don't want that. But like, if you look at Substack notes, we want subscriptions because that's how we make money too. And so we are the only social media algorithm that exists that is actually incentivizing readers to click in and read a long form post. And we are tracking whether those convert into subscriptions. And if it doesn't, we wouldn't be doing it because it wouldn't be good for our business. So I think it's trying to get people out of this more, black and white way of thinking about technology as like evil or good or whatever, and be like, well, it actually really depends on like the particular implementation. And like, I think that technology can be a great amplifier of human creativity.
This is so interesting to me because you're also, a mainstream journalist, having published in a journal and other places.
That's so funny.
Um, and, tech journalism is kind of the embodiment of some of these contradictions, right? You have
Hmm.
technology using journalists who are
Mm,
great beneficiaries of a lot of the tools that are being built, but they are also, tasked in a liberal democracy with, being the people's conscience, right? Like in that free press ideal, journalism is about holding the big guy accountable and creating some form of transparency for the little guy. And so it's a kind of dual role. And it's very hard to do it right. Who are your do you have role models in tech writing who you think kind of
mm.
create a good balance?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I do think that one thing that's bothered me for a long time is that I draw a lot of inspiration from writers and I draw a lot of inspiration from technologists. Both of those groups of people feel like my communities, but they mostly hate each other, right? Like you know this too. Like in San Francisco, like if you say to a group of AI researchers that you were a journalist, especially as you said it, mainstream journalist, that is a very scary phrase. Like I remember I was at an AI happy hour like a few months ago and someone's like, "Oh yeah, like you're working on a book about the AI companies," and one of the guys there, who's like an executive at Anthropic, literally physically backs away from me. Like it was instinctual. He didn't even realize. And I'm chilling him out. I'm like, "Don't worry, this whole conversation is off the record. I'm here in my personal capacity. Like this
That's
is
hilarious. And he's like
I
coming back with his lawyer.
yeah, like he was clearly like freaking out internally, and I'm like, no, 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 no. Like I am just here socially because I'm friends with some people here. I am not reporting on this conversation, and so it's hard because I think that my writing role models and my tech role models in many cases are different. There are writers I love, like I love Susan Sontag. I think that Gideon Lewis Krauss is an amazing journalist, whether in his tech journalism or in his other coverage. I think that Anna Wieder's prose styling is really amazing. But I think that a lot of being in this sort of intersection point is having to take inspiration from both sides because oftentimes, say, the people I look to who are really great thinkers about technology might be different from those who I think they're my style role models for like how do you write super compelling, vivid prose, right? And so like that intersection is something that I'm trying to navigate. And then of course, yeah, the sort of like social the social hilarity of being a journalist in an industry and in a city that really is very suspicious of journalists. Like when you said, "Oh, journalists are trying to uphold this free press, like hold people to account, da da da." No one here believes that. It's very funny. being a Substacker goes over much better than being a journalist. But I think there is a lot of value to mainstream journalism too. And so the other thing, just, in conversation that I try to do is to explain to people the virtue of this stuff. And someone has got to do the investigative accountability, whatever work, because even if you love blogs, none of these blogs can exist when you don't have a basis of reporting to build off of. You need a shared set of facts to be able to do the commentary too. And so I do want people to see it as as potentially a more symbiotic thing.
But even, I mean, journalism is a very specific thing because first of all, it's hilarious to imagine these tech bros panicking when somebody claims to be a journalist. And we also kind of understand why the tech world would be so suspicious of the free press ideal.
Yeah.
They have had very bad experiences, and
Yeah.
we've just emerged from a culture war where it would be difficult to say that everybody was at their best behavior when it
Hmm.
comes to
Yeah.
whatever democratic ideal. But I feel like, of course, Interact is also kind of midway between the cultural world and
Right.
world, right in the middle of this negotiation between like tools and individuality, creativity, access. And I feel that the distrust kind of runs deeper.
Hmm.
Like if you actually all I do all day is basically these interdisciplinary conversations where you're trying to have, a CEO or an engineer, somebody with a background in applied mathematics or software, or both, to have a fruitful discussion with somebody who comes from, I don't know, continental philosophy.
Mm.
It's kind of like people from different planets. I always feel like an
Yeah.
galactic mediator, like
Hmm.
to like find some kind of common language between these two groups who altogether ultimately want the same thing, right? We want
Right.
humanity to be healthy, prosperous, the societies to be stable. We want people to flourish. We want people to have the freedom to associate, to choose, to create their own lives. Like this is what we're all working on. But how we're getting there is just vastly different. Does this resonate? And when you find yourself between these two worlds, in the place where they clash, how do you identify this seemingly very deep running conflict between tech and culture?
Mm. Yeah, I'm really curious to also hear about your experience mediating these conversations for intellect after, because you have so much experience doing this as well. I think you're right that people do want the same goals, and a lot of it does come down to shared language. Like one funny thing that I remember I did in undergrad many years ago was, so I did undergrad at Stanford, so it was my first time in Silicon Valley. I was a humanities person. I didn't know what I was studying yet, but it wasn't technology. But it's a very tech-dominated, STEM-dominated campus. And my freshman year, I basically read what I imagined in my head as the Silicon Valley canon. I read Principles by Ray Dalio and The Hard Thing About Hard Things and Zero to One and all of these tech books, all the PG essays, all of them, because I realized that people taking me seriously was actually just in many ways a function of what words I used. Like people joke about how tech people love to call things orthogonal and non-trivial and to say like reward hacking when product market fit when you don't need to say these words. Like there are always simpler ways to say things, but people are gonna go for like the in-group jargon. But I actually think it became quite useful for me to learn the in-group jargon because when you play translator between the worlds, you have to use it to actually get people to understand an issue in the language that they appreciate. So I think the vocabulary is part of it. I think that also acknowledging and being empathetic and realistic about the ways that, for example, journalism has failed technology. Like you say, people are not on their best behavior. There have been some really, really unfair hit pieces that like we have all read, we have all witnessed. Like I have been on the inside of multiple companies working at them where I would see pieces come out in big newspapers like the New York Times and stuff, and I would read it and be like, this is literally not true, or this is like the most bad faith, distorted version of the truth that you could possibly imagine. And those are really blackpilling moments for me. And I think that like if I'm trying to build trust with a technologist about understanding their position, you got to start with, yeah, like your critique is fair and your critique is real. The journalism industry writ large has failed in many ways. The hope is that I individually can be different. But like if you sort of repeat the talking points about journalism as an ideal and not also recognize its reality and its flaws, I think people lose trust, and that goes vice versa as well.
So writing for the bigger outlets, how was that experience? Like, guide us through it.
Yeah, so I've done three freelance pieces so far for Business Insider, The Wall Street Journal, and SF Standard. I'm about to pick up a couple more freelance pieces. So I was in New York meeting with editors at The Atlantic and The Times and a bunch of the big New York newspapers last week. It's interesting because I find that most editors are truly very curious people. It's a job that you don't take unless you are genuinely intellectually curious, that you want to know about a wide range of subjects, that you are trying to be a truth seeker. I don't think most people, especially editors, are trying to push much of an agenda. It's a generalist job also. Like an editor has to have pretty broad expertise. What that means also is a lot of editors are not going to be as deep in it as I am. And so, especially when it comes to AI, San Francisco stuff, these folks don't know what is going on a lot of the time. And they know that they don't know. Like they are humble about it, they are open to it. But I think it is just interesting for me to be thinking about how to communicate to a broader audience because, in fact, that editor, a smart person who is not a specialist, is much closer to the reader of these publications as I am. And so, one funny one was I was one of the editors I talked to last week. I said ML, which to me feels like so obvious, and he was like, what does ML mean?" I was like, "Oh, machine learning." And to be clear, he doesn't have a background in technology editing. He's newer to the tech beat, and so like I understand he's a super smart guy in a bunch of other ways. But like that's something that I don't even think of when I say, like I just assume that everyone knows what that means. And I just have little moments like this all the time. But I think it is a good muscle to exercise because I'm so used to talking to people who swim in the same waters as me, who know all the same jargon as me. The other one that's interesting and maybe a bit more challenging sometimes, and it really depends on the editor and the outlet. Like I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, is that there is sometimes a pressure to sort of link things to both like the news and what's super timely, but also to high stakes issues like the political moment or whatever, even if it's not that relevant. And so I remember like when I did a defense tech piece, like there's a lot of like, oh, we should like mention Donald Trump in this piece about like Stanford kids going into defense tech, and even in a little aside. And I'm like, frankly, like, I don't think it's super relevant in a bunch of these ways. Like to me, it is not that important that like Palantir is founded by Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel was a prominent Trump supporter in like the 2016 election cycle, da 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 da. But I think that whether it is because the audience prefers it or it's an editor's own sort of political leanings, I did notice there's a lot more of sort of trying to like shape the specifics of these narratives about Silicon Valley around these national political news issues that I was not necessarily thinking about. And I think there are it is possible that this is like a better thing for readers, but for me it's a little bit weird because like I don't think that these national political battles are always the right frame for issues going on in the tech industry.
So basically, what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, and I think this is fascinating, is that those who think that all of the established media, the cathedral, is just anti-tech out the
Mhm.
door, it's not so much the case. What is
I don't think so.
thinking instead is that most major American outlets are fundamentally about politics, right? Like
Yeah.
they have
Yeah.
evolved to keep power accountable, and that in almost all cases that power is political. Sometimes it's business, but for them,
Hmm.
tech is downstream of business and business is downstream of politics. So they will go from
Mm.
product to business model to governance structure. And that's the
Mm.
only like paradigm in which they can understand, which is super interesting because a lot of tech people don't give a damn about politics.
Yeah.
We hear
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
some, even I think the tech leaders who go and schmooze with Trump,
No,
like
they're
they
just doing
don't
it for their
care.
businesses.
They
They
are
know that this
above
is
and
an
beyond this.
administration where your business will do better if you schmooze, but like they don't care about Trump. Like they don't really care
They
about,
don't
they probably
care
didn't care
about
about
Trump.
Kamala Harris. They don't
Sorry.
care about any of these people. They just want to build their business. No,
Trump is just a
that's a
guy
really
who wants
smart
their money,
framing.
you know?
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it's a super smart framing that you presented that all of this is downstream of these outlets being geared up to do politics reporting, to hold power to account. I do think that is the dominant lens, even for the people who are now, covering tech. And again, I think that these folks are humble. I think that they know what they don't know was a big thing. Like they were very open to, you tell me what's interesting. You tell me if I'm getting stuff wrong. Like a lot of The Atlantic, for example, doesn't have a single reporter on their tech team out of San Francisco or the Bay Area, which seems insane to me. Like, how are you telling these stories from all the way in New York and DC? We know like so much of the information just floats around like house parties and sort of like very niche Twitters and like who these Signal and WhatsApp groups. And so I
In their
find that
DMs.
really totally, totally. And so, to their credit, I think that like the mainstream media understands that this is a gap. And when I chat with them, they're always like, yeah, part of the reason we're excited about you, say, writing for us is because there is a sort of texture that you can get locally. And also because we know that San Francisco is not really reading our newspapers. That's another big shift, right? Is like Silicon Valley is going direct now. There's all of this media that is made both by and for Silicon Valley, by and for the tech industry, whether it's like TBPN or a bunch of podcasts that are primarily like made by tech people and listened to by tech people. I don't feel like when I ask AI folks, like, what publications do you read? What journalists do you read? It's always going to be a blog or a podcast. It's never, ever, ever a mainstream publication. And I have asked this question many times. And that I think hurts for an established New York paper to think that I'm the paper of record, like I am covering the thing that most matters. And yet in what the most dynamic and profitable industry in the United States, they don't even read our stuff. Like they don't even care what we think, what we're covering. And there's also I'm noticing more these days kind of a insecurity almost that independent media and that this going direct strategy is in some ways superseding the monopoly on attention and press that mainstream outlets used to have.
I mean, they do read it when it's about them.
Yes, that is true. They love that people still are being profiled positively in the New York Times. Like
I'm pretty sure that
no company will ever say no to like a glowing New York Times profile.
absolutely
But like
most,
they're not reading it for general
yeah.
edification, It's not their news source. They just want to be able to like print it out and like put it on their wall and like brag about it on Twitter, which is fine.
You
Like
like
me too.
send
I
it
get
to
it.
grandma. Like, grandma, look at
Yes.
the New York Times.
Oh my God, that's literally me when I got my like Wall Street Journal like print piece out was like I had never been published in like a print newspaper before. I don't read print newspapers. Why would I read a print newspaper? Like I have the
I'm
internet
doing
and
one
I was
specific scenario, which is airport Financial Times. Like every time,
okay.
like Pavlov's dog, if I arrive to an airport, I'm
Mm.
going to buy Financial Times.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. But literally, I was like hunting around San Francisco for any print newsstand that would carry the Wall Street Journal weekend edition. There are only
Yeah.
two in all of the cities. So I like had to go
Oh
pretty far to
my God.
like go find one. And I got it just to show my parents and to be like, look, it's a print newspaper with my name on it. But like, yeah, that's not how I read the news. And it's not how anyone else in
No,
the
and I
city
don't
does
even know, like
either.
my friend Matt Clifford was in, I think, Washington Post. I don't even know. And I was
Okay.
like, I live in Manhattan and I had no idea
Yeah.
where to get a print newspaper. And I
Yeah.
friends like, hey, like around 86th Street, like, do you know something? And she was like, no. And I'm like, but you lived here for like 25
I
years.
know.
But like,
Yeah.
we are millennials. We haven't, like, other than certain types of magazines or, when you're in it or your friend is in it or you're at the
Right.
airport or like a very specific situation, I think I haven't been buying print since the 2000s. And that's
Yeah.
a long time ago. And that's so interesting. But it's also a kind of waste of intellectual capital. And this is what I've been always
Mm.
working on. And I know that Substack is also working on this, which is like unblocking these silos where
Mhm.
different types of intelligence kind of get like squashed in together and they are unaware of each other. The weak ties are not functional. And you are like, you guys are like super geniuses at this thing. And like Jasmine and her friends are great at this other thing. You need to talk to each other and
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
psychologically safe and constructive way
Yeah.
because like nobody benefit like we only know things together. Humans
Yeah.
are not solitary thinkers. Even people in history who seem like solitary thinkers were building on like at least previous people, right? Like
Mhm.
we inspire and kind of cross-inseminate. And so I always find that creating these like psychological barriers of distrust,
Yeah.
linguistic barriers, like aggressively building different jargon for group signaling. They are great for like entry. Like I think especially
Mhm.
in tech, you can signal your entry like you did that I speak the lingo. But for like long-term collaboration, they are very counterproductive.
Yeah, and I find it kind of like solipsistic, honestly, and I think Silicon Valley has become more so in the last few years because of the techlash, because they've had these bad experiences with mainstream journalism and trying to communicate what they're about to the broader public. But I feel like these days, because it's all going direct and it's all media buy-in for tech people, like that's great. Like I'm not trying to like shut down the independent media ecosystem at all. I read a ton of that stuff. But like when I have friends who are in New York City who don't work in the industry and they're like, Jasmine, what's the one thing I should read to keep up on AI? Like I don't really have an answer because like like the
No,
Prakash podcast is too
you
niche and
have to be
technical
like
for my
really.
friend who works in like philanthropy and has an English degree, like it is actually pretty hard to figure out because like there aren't people here who are doing writing about AI in San Francisco and technology in a way that is legible and relevant to the rest of the world. And that is a huge missed opportunity because that means that they understand us less. And then we get angry because they don't understand us and they're misrepresenting us. And there's all these outsiders trying to like gawk at SF and say it's all evil. But I'm like, we're not even really making an effort ourselves to be understood. And so I think that like, the thing that you and I are really passionate about, these conduits, these facilitated safe environments for discussion, like that's why they matter, right?
Absolutely. And by the way, if you started a series on Substack that is just like glossary,
Mm.
I'm serious, like a subsection on your Substack that is just glossary for tech and culture. And like you would pick out specific words and explain to
Mm.
like cultural people what this means and maybe pick a culture word.
Yeah, maybe vice
Explain to
versa.
tech people.
I was
I
so
would love
surprised.
that.
Yeah, because my best performing Substack post is basically like a dictionary of like tech Twitter. And I wrote it pretty quickly. I thought it was like a very low stakes, kind of dumb. Like, I'm going to summarize some tweets posts. It's like, what's an NPC? What's 996? Like, what is
I
the
would
permanent
love, I think that
underclass?
would be
And
super
like,
viral.
people really
Yeah.
liked it and resonated with it. I think because like, a lot of people in the rest of the country who aren't scrolling Twitter a million hours a day are like,
Do
what are
it.
these people talking about? And they do reveal things. So I'm like, maybe I should make it a series. And I really like the idea as well of actually taking words from culture, from political theory, from like the art world, and translating them in the other direction. I think like let's talk about Bourdieu and cultural capital. Like this is a useful concept for you guys as well, and so maybe it would be fun to do a kind of bi-directional sort of thing. That's a good idea.
I love it. And you can kind of frame it in that you are creating a literacy because
Mm.
whether you know these words or not, you are living that life.
Hmm.
Like even if you don't understand specific words in technology, you are living as per their function because you use these
Yes.
tools and they shape your life.
Yeah.
And maybe you are not familiar with certain expressions from the classics or religion or
Hmm.
social theory, but your entire social system is based on that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
everything you do socially in your life, from etiquette to HR to
Hmm.
what it says on the government website, these things are downstream from sociology. Like some people researched this and they came up with something that fit their own worldview, and they are like vast numbers of students and professors kind of upholding that worldview. And I feel like the fact that we don't speak that language of the other side, or we even consider that another side as opposed to like layers on top of each other,
Yeah.
I think it's just not
Yeah.
productive.
I mean, it's kind of like I remember one of the first things that I did this year because I'm writing and reporting a lot more on AI than I used to was do a post about different definitions of AGI and what AGI means. And some people think that debate is semantic. They're like, we're never going to agree. It doesn't matter. Like, we don't need to have it, blah, blah, blah. And like, I actually am like, actually, the semantics really matter because like, if we're going to be spending like hundreds of billions of dollars or whatever building AGI, I think that people should know what that means. Like, I think we should have an understanding, even if that definition is different between different companies, of what Anthropic and OpenAI and DeepMind have in their head that they are spending all this money and
But
building all
what the
these data
fuss is
centers for.
about, right?
Yeah, like,
What is it about?
right,
Like, why would very intelligent people, like can it be that they are just like so gullible that they bought into a bubble? Or is it that there really is something there? And actually, like the smartest people alive today all think so. And they
right.
hate each other. So it can't just be like some kind of consensus forming decision by committee. I'm always,
Yeah.
there are all these tweets going about how like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel have like average intelligence. I'm like, you
I
can
have
say a
not
lot
seen
of
these,
things
but
about
like,
these people, but like, can we
yeah,
like not say dumb things? Like,
right,
you can't
right.
really argue for somebody's average intelligence by showcasing your own average intelligence. Like, you have to like understand.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just so, I don't know. It's just, it tells me a lot about people's biases.
Right, right. Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff is there's a lot of wishful thinking that I hear that goes on when I talk to people outside of SF about AI and about tech. Like they really want it to hit a wall. They really want it to be a bubble. And like that is almost the sense that I get is people are really interested in all of the ways that these things are failing. Like whether it is hallucinations, whether it is saying offensive stuff, whether it's like, oh yeah, progress is hitting a wall or it's gonna be a bubble and blah 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 blah. But like I'm not saying that AI is not a bubble. I think it is partially a bubble probably, and some startups are gonna go under. But like I can tell that the place that it comes from for a lot of these folks looking in is like there is this new disruptive thing that they don't like very much and don't really want to succeed. And so there's more of an interest in, yes, like let me read stuff and let me speculate about how it's all going to fall apart.
Because they're
One
not
thing,
a part of it, right? So there's this
yeah.
thing that is being developed over people's heads.
Hmm.
And for tech, this is so common, and for some science stuff as well, right? Like we've seen this with the vaccines.
Mm,
A person without a science PhD or a software engineering capability, they feel like, oh my God, there are these big movements in the world,
right,
all this capital, all this intelligence, and they have no say in it. So all they can do is like resist, right?
right.
And I think we as a society, we haven't really figured out. And we'll talk in a moment about your upcoming book with Kevin Roose and like that you helped him with as like one way of like creating this societal dialogue that, okay, this is about all of
Yeah.
us. It uses our data,
Yeah.
it uses our brains as its own fuel. So we might as well feel like we're part of it. I mean, nothing so far before LLMs has been so collectively created.
Yeah. 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 I mean, Henry Farrell always describes AI as a social and a cultural technology in the sense like AI itself and LM itself is a form of collective intelligence, like you said, like all of the data, all of the training. It's humans at every step of the
Collective
process.
dumbness. Also,
That's
like
fair. Collective
our dumbest
mediocrity. I
takes
don't
ever
know.
are also going in there.
That's true. That's true. I mean, it's so funny. Like GPT-1 was trained mostly on like fan fiction. And so the earliest versions of GPT were always like talking about like horny vampires or whatever because all of the training data was just like this crappy fan fiction. Now it's like there's like so much of Reddit and these like SEO slop. And so like are we that surprised that sometimes the advice it gives sounds like SEO slop? Like we shouldn't be. So that's right.
That's hilarious. In your experience, like, what is the thing that maybe normies most misunderstand about AI?
Hmm. Um, let's see. Yeah, it's a broad question. One is that I think that intelligence is jagged. Like I really come back to that jagged frontier concept. I think Ethan Mollick is maybe the one who popularized the term, but that if intelligence is not just like an IQ score, and this is something that even people in the industry, I think for a long time did not fully appreciate, but like it's not a single number that's going to tell you everything about how this thing works. It's more like a spectrum, right? And you can have it's like video game stats. Like your strength can be from 1 to 100, your charisma, your wisdom, your intelligence. And it is extremely possible for AI to be
Like in
exceptional at some
Westworld,
skills
where
and
they
god
like
awful at
this
others,
shit.
right? Yeah, and so like, the thing I come back to is that AI discovered entirely new proteins before it could count the number of R's in strawberry. Like clearly this is this is not something we can map very cleanly and linearly onto some human intelligence score. And that's not how human intelligence works either. None of us are just like these single stats. So, and I think that has tremendous implications. Like I think it means that for at least the near future, AI is definitely more of a complement than a substitute to human labor. So that has a lot of implications for job stuff. I think it means that just because AI fails at one particular task that you do, that doesn't mean it's not going to be amazing in other capacities. You just have to understand where the like jagged edges are. So I think that's sort of the model that in a way, most want people to understand about at least LLMs as they currently exist.
Oh my God, that is so interesting. Eric Hoel was on the podcast and
Mm,
a friend of mine, and I think maybe 7 or 8 years ago, he wrote this essay that there's no free lunch.
mm,
And it's like he has a theory that AGI is basically impossible because general intelligence is a kind of oxymoron almost, like
hmm.
that all intelligence is specialized, and that we can think about like a hive mind, like multiple general intelligences or multiple specialized intelligences adding up into a generalized one. But thinking of it in like with the metaphor of a brain or a human brain is just completely like not realistic in how intelligence
Mm,
evolved, how problem solving or problem creation works. And I found it very interesting at the time. I think he became a little bit famous or infamous for it because that's not what people wanted to hear about. After Bostrom's superintelligence book, everybody
Mm.
believed that there's either an evil or a benevolent, AI dictator just around the corner.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't think I've read that essay. I think that right now, at least, like with our with the current state of AI, Eric's view is probably more right than wrong. Like all of these benchmarks that AI does amazing on, it's often because the AIs are narrowly trained to that benchmark. And there are so many examples, so much evidence of benchmark gaming. It's teaching to the test, right? Like just because you do amazing on the SATs, partly that is probably your general intelligence. A lot of that might just be how many practice tests did you take? And LLMs are things that can take all the practice tests, learn from all the practice tests, read every single answer book and test book in existence. And so that's why it's really hard to design good benchmarks because you need to keep the answer sets and questions private if you really want to measure generality. But there are all these giant incentives for the companies to be training on the test set, trying to like very narrowly excel. But that doesn't mean just because the AI can pass the bar or the MCAT or whatever that it can go be a lawyer or a doctor. Like one of those is significantly more general than the tests that we have designed and that you can narrowly train for.
If writers could ask the tech companies to change something about LLMs, Anthropic, OpenAI, to make LLMs more useful, helpful to them, what do you think they would ask for?
Ooh. I think that probably better. I want to say it's either better research skill or better editing. I think that most writers want to be doing the writing and they would not want, I mean, the LLMs are not very good at prose, and like I kind of want them to be better at prose, but I think writers wouldn't want them to because that's the part they really love and enjoy and express themselves through. The vision rather of an LM as a research assistant or a fact checker or an editor for all of those like parts of the writing stack that especially if you are an independent writer or a blogger or somebody doing it on the side, you don't have those resources that a big publication does. And I think that almost all writers really want an amazing editor or want an amazing research assistant or want a fact checker for their work. And LLMs are okay at those things, but I don't think they're that good. And so those are sort of the supporting roles that I think that LLMs could really play.
I just wrote two essays. One is 21,000 words, the other
Oh,
is
wow.
13,000 words. So, and I definitely did not want AI to write any of it.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
it
like
was not,
it doesn't feel
yeah.
good.
But if it
It's
was like
not you.
if I was like an email jobs kind of
Mm-hmm.
person, having to like push out,
Yeah.
by rote,
Yeah.
really,
Grant applications. I mean, LLMs can
yeah,
already kind of do that.
or
The
like
only thing is that they're
marketing
a bit too,
emails. Yeah.
they sound a bit samey, so people can tell. But
Yeah.
like those forms of writing feel very distinct to me from the more artistic
Yeah.
craft-based forms of writing that you and I do, right? Like there's a difference between the music that you listen to for pleasure versus like I need some music for like the background of this instructional video that I'm
Yes,
doing, or I need
exactly.
elevator music. Like it
Same
doesn't
problem
really
now.
matter to me if Suno makes the elevator music, that seems fine, or royalty-free YouTube background music, like okay, whatever. But when you are reading writing for pleasure, like it is almost never necessary that you need to consume a 20,000 word like piece of creative nonfiction, right? Like
Yeah.
that is people are doing that because they love it. They're not doing it because out of like instrumental utility reasons the vast majority of the time. And so if people are going to do it for pleasure, like you don't want any sort of AI like style homogenization
No.
enforced on that experience.
And I found myself like being imperfect on purpose to signal my
Hmm.
humanity. Like these are my
Hmm.
first like really big pieces that I've been writing since like the new 4.0 earlier this year.
Hmm.
And I'm like always observing myself, how I behave. And I'm like, oh, I actually like I'm a little bit more punk with my text.
Oh, really?
I start doing
Fun.
things that I know that LMs wouldn't do. And I actually like asked
Hmm.
Rohit, Krishnan, he was reviewing my piece because there's a part about India in it. And I was like, can you tell it's human by how bad it is? Wink, wink. And it's not like bad, but like
Right.
it's a little
But
bit chaotic on purpose. Like I want to show
yeah.
that this is from my brain and human brains are
Yeah.
beforehand, I was much more anal about making the text very sterile and very polished.
Mm,
No longer that because the addition of the voice and bad
yeah.
way, quote unquote,
Hmm.
has an added value. And we were talking with Rohit about how this is how, when photography became a thing, artists
Mm,
would go avant-garde. Because
hmm.
until then, if you wanted to do the marriage portrait of your daughter, it
Hmm.
had to be like realistic and make her look good. So this guy would want to marry her without seeing her ever. And then when the, photography became the primary tool of capturing reality for people and people's likeliness and likelihood, then the creative kind of Pandora's box could be opened. And first you had, some wild attempts, impressionists and post-impressionists and expressionists and like playing with color,
Yeah.
a lot of absinthe in the south of France really helped, I hear. And then,
It's
it
funny.
went crazy, right?
Yeah.
He ended up
Yeah.
with a guy dropping paint randomly on a canvas and it's selling for like hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
millions
Hmm.
of dollars. So I think there will be something like that with the English language. There has to be.
Yeah. I love the way you said like my writing's more punk now. Like it makes me think like yeah, like a clever a run-on sentence that is well placed does a lot, you know? Like these are the experimental stuff like where you choose to break the rules because of like RLHF and whatever. The LLMs will not break the rules. They won't produce run-on sentences unless you ask them to. And so I think you're right that like breaking the rules, showing the process, like letting people hear the mistakes in music, hear the sort of like surround sound and the background noise and whatever. Like, what does that look like? The equivalent in writing,
Like
right?
when you hear when you hear the brass section breathe on a
Yes.
classical
Yeah, yeah,
music
yeah.
album, like I want to hear them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're
Mm-hmm.
literally breathing the music.
Yeah.
Machine music,
Yeah.
it's some guy with a tube of metal in his mouth,
Mm-hmm.
and like 20
Yeah.
years of practice, and that has value.
Mm-hmm. Did you try using an LLM to generate any part of it just to like see how it was?
Um, so like all the LLMs always change, and on some days they will give me, even if I just ask for like typo checking, which is what I mainly use it for. It depends. If I use a lot of dates, then I might.
Mm.
But both Claude and GPT right now give a lot of errors for dates.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are
They're
not
not
very.
cons
They're
the
not.
consistency is not there. That's
Yeah,
the kind of the
sometimes
stuff
they
where
have
I'm
the
like,
periods, sometimes no. I always double
yeah.
check. Gemini is a little bit more a good, like I think it's a bit better for fact checking. And
Hmm.
sometimes GPT gives me rewritten parts of the text. Like it says,
Mm.
oh, combine these to make it tighten, tighten, tighten it. And I'm like, no, the
Hmm.
goal is that this should be long. Like I want people to
Right.
have time with this
Hmm.
because the content is the form.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
like sit with it. And like you're not like, oh, I'm going to like tighten Dostoevsky's The Idiot. Not that I'm trying to work to it, but like it's you're supposed to inhabit these texts and they're supposed to be long. And there is that
Hmm.
Woody Allen joke that I went to a speed reading class and then I learned how to speed read and then I read War and Peace in 20 minutes. It's about Russia. Like, yeah, we knew that. They really capture all the
Yeah.
nuances in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But sometimes it tries to rewrite it, and there I can see how it's trying to capture the tone, but it can't
Hmm. Yeah.
because it's so specific. And I just ask LLMs like, don't bother, like, don't do
Yeah.
that. It's
Yeah. That's like
none
my
of the
personal
use of
eval is
my
like I test it
energy.
every once in a while. I test all the models, but they're not there yet. They're not there yet.
We have a couple of minutes left, and I want to ask you two things. The first one, I heard that you have a legendary San Francisco writing community. Actually, on and off produces very famous bestseller writers. What's going on with this, and what changes have you noticed in the past couple of years with, publishing changing so much and the media kind of going off the rails, now LLMs? I mean, you've seen the birth of this new era, right?
That's so funny. I don't know where you heard that from. I mean, so because I started writing full time this
Happy
year,
users. Happy users.
okay, I'm happy to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because I started writing full time this year, I really felt the desire to surround myself with more people who weren't just in the tech world, but who, treated writing as seriously as I did. And then, in addition to that, I think one thing that I've always felt about the Bay is I love the Bay. I think it's a very intellectually vibrant place, but it is also sort of fragmented and siloed. Like you have the journalists do not talk to like the Substack bloggers, do not talk to like the indie zine people or the queer poets or whatever. And like I'm not saying these people got to be BFFs, they're not going to, but like I think it would be really cool to sort of like bring them together every once in a while. And so Claire Collier, who edits Asterisk magazine, and I have been hosting these writer happy hours every few months, where we invite like 50 to 100 writers, bring them to often some cultural venue like a bookstore, or we did the Interval at the Long Now, or this art book press called Arion in Fort Mason, and we just have drinks and just invite everyone to come hang. And it's been really great. I think there's a lot of energy. I think that people actually do want to break out of their bubbles, and like the communists want to talk to the like sort of I don't know, neoliberal substackers, and I don't know. I think there's some interest in every once in a while breaking out of your scene a bit. So that's been really fun for me just because love a good party, and then especially love a good party where everyone's very smart and curious and has a point of view, and like it's a pretty low drama thing. I do also think, because you asked about like how has SF been rethinking writing, how has that community shifted over the past couple years? I actually think it's become much stronger. I don't know if that's because of AI, but I do feel a greater appreciation for narrative and for storytelling emanating from the tech scene. You see all of these new indie magazines and print publications, right, that are doing really amazing work, like Asterisk, of course, but also, I mean, Palladium's been around for a while. There's the Works in Progress is now doing a print magazine. There's Arena, which is a more right-leaning magazine. There's all of these like amazing print magazines that are sort of like coming up out of nowhere, oftentimes funded or like connected to folks in the tech community, but they are like true magazines where they are paying writers to write essays about culture and art and things that are broader than just enterprise SaaS businesses. And oftentimes they're doing print, which I'm also quite surprised and delighted by, is that like they are investing quite a lot of effort and energy into creating beautiful print artifacts that you want to buy and that you want to display in your house and on your coffee table. And I think that that comes from a few things. One is that, the East Coast sort of way of being a wealthy person is to give your money to cultural institutions like the museums, and to like have your name on a wing of the museum or on the symphony or something like that. I feel like the West Coast way of being a wealthy person is to start your own cultural institution, and magazines like presses are a part of that. I also think that there's been a greater recognition across society. I think that stories really matter, narratives really matter, command of attention really matters. Yes, of course, products, what you're actually building is the core, but like when you it's like deeper than marketing, but like whatever like the version of something deeper than marketing is, like what mission are you a part of, like what are your values, can you display that to prospective recruits, to people in your scene, can you signal those values? That has become a much more important thing, and one of the ways that people are I guess responding to that trend is by either starting these imprints or even like hiring in-house storytellers, documentary makers, and things like that. So I actually think there's like quite a cultural renaissance happening in SF that I feel pretty good about. I think it's a good time to be a writer here. There aren't enough folks doing creative work still, but it's better than it's been
Well,
for a
now that you
while.
explained these happy hours, I want to go.
Yes,
Scared to
next
fly
time you're
over.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would
yeah.
love
We do them every
that.
few months. I think it'll be great. I don't know if we'll do them before the end of the year, but they're great. And I think it's also a great way to like bring people to new venues. Like I really like hosting them in like bookstores and galleries and things, because I'm like, some of these people are not going to those on their own, and like they deserve attention and love. So,
I love this. And I know you have a complicated relationship with publishing and the traditional way of publishing. I mean, obviously, you ended up at Substack for a reason,
Yeah.
and you're more on the disruptor side. But do you see yourself ever becoming a publishing house for these writers? I mean, you're building
Hmm.
something very beautifully, intangibly valuable.
I mean, this is maybe where I have kind of the Substack mentality, where I believe in like a horizontal like networked ecosystem, right? Like I'm like all of these writers should be talking to each other, they should be linking each other's work, they should be collaborating, but I see it in this more like fluid horizontal way rather than like oh like I or somebody else is going to be the single gatekeeper deciding who to print and who to not. But like I'll tell you one like longer term dream that I'm very excited about, which is in the next few years at some point I want to do like a big citywide sort of the thing I'm thinking of in my head is halfway between the New Yorker Ideas Festival, like the New York style literary festivals, and something like Manifest, like the poly market rationalist adjacent, like Bay Area unconference, right? Or like,
I'll help
and
with
like
this,
the
whatever you
exact thing that
need.
is in
I
between
love
that,
it.
like venues all over the city, like
Sign me
bring
up.
in like all sorts of Bay Area writers on panels and debates, unconferences, mixers. Like I want to like take over SF for a weekend and just like show that this can be a really pluralistic, incredible intellectual hub. I want Daniel Lurie, the mayor, to make one of his famous Instagram Reels cameos. This is like a vision I have in my head. I don't have the operational bandwidth to do that right now, but someday I'm like, I want to do that thing.
I want to help. This sounds amazing. This is so cool. So, for the last couple of minutes, just tell us a little bit about the book, the AGI book.
Mm,
I know people are super curious about this. I know it will take, because this is traditional publishing and their kind of timelines
yeah.
are, I don't know, not necessarily for consumption, but you guys negotiated a relatively fast pace with Kevin Roose to get this book out. You were his main researcher. You helped him put this book together, which I hear was a wonderfully enjoyable process. So, what is the book about? How does it, play into your translator ambitions between culture and
Mm.
tech? And when can we read it?
Yeah, so I am for the past year-ish or half year-ish, I've been helping Kevin Roose, the New York Times AI columnist, research and write and edit his book, The AGI Chronicles. We are super excited about it. The gist of the book is that it's a history of the AI race between roughly 2017 and 2025. Obviously, it starts earlier than that. It's going to go later than this year. But we feel like this is a really critical period where a lot of the foundations were laid when people started to talk about AGI in a much more serious way than they ever had before, where we were seeing the first signs of life of a thing that had general intelligence and broad capabilities. And that was also just like fascinating from the perspective of like corporate drama. Like, we start out with Google Brain and DeepMind and OpenAI, and then Deep Brain and DeepMind merge, and OpenAI and Anthropic split off, and there's all of this juicy stuff, these debates about not just technology and that kind of thing, but also the role that AI ought to have in the world, the governance of these structures, what it means to create something that could someday be smarter than humans. And so we think of the book as it's, first of all, a narrative nonfiction book. It's a history. We are not doing predictions or takes because I think in the AI business, you cannot be doing predictions and takes on like a 1 year, 2 year time horizon because you're just going to be wrong immediately. And we are very aware of this fact.
You
But
have
I
to
think
be
it's
like Dan
something,
Wang, just go after
oh
a
my gosh.
publisher and be like, we have to put this in.
I know.
Haven't, we can't
Yeah,
publish it
because
without.
it's gonna be irrelevant so soon. But like we think there will be longevity in writing what is a technological history plus like a business drama plus like a cultural portrait of what it's like to actually be working in the AI scene. And I think there's gonna be a bunch of good, juicy investigative stuff, like stuff that has never been reported before that I think people will just read because they like want the gossip. But the hope is also that for the broad public, like we do intend for this to be like a widely read book for all kinds of people who may not have had an interest in AI before to learn something about the technologies and the people building it and why it might matter, and for it to feel very accessible and fun and not something that's just limited to the SFAI crowd. So I
And to
think the
make
AGI
people feel
Chronicles,
that this is about them, like this is not, you know, we this is what I'm always trying to like emphasize and stuff that I build and I write, that we're all in this together.
yeah,
Trying to
totally.
like, and not just as a user, because of course, as a user, despite appearances, you do have a choice. Like people like to feel like, oh, I must use Uber or
Mm,
whatever other company. And no, actually, it's a little bit more pluralistic than that. Like maybe it's a little bit harder to get around using Google, but like there are people who don't use Google.
yeah,
Like I always try to like emphasize in people the agency and the fact that
yes.
users have a lot of agency. Like if users stop using a product because they don't like it or they have like a political problem with it, the tech company will have to react to that because their business is being
And
tempered.
I think we've seen this. Like, I think that tech companies have both made mistakes, but also responded to the public on things like sycophancy, on sort of the mental health issues of teenagers. Like, I think it does matter that we all follow it, that we follow it well. And so, yeah, I think it's hopefully going to be a popular book that lots of people enjoy reading, that also when they read it, it's not just like a fun, thrilling business drama, but they actually learn something about like what is it that we are using? What sort of grand philosophical questions does this pose? And maybe like next time I hear about AI and I'm in a discussion about what role we want it to play, like I will feel a little bit more informed about that.
Amen. This is our biggest hope. Jasmine Sun, thank you for being on the Hope Access. We learn so much from you every time we read you, we listen to you. I will be keeping an eye out for any like dictionary that comes out of in the next month. I think it would be hugely useful. And
Okay, noted.
and you're the person to do it. I think it would be almost like a gift to humanity, and you should absolutely do it. Also, like if anybody is going to explain this stuff, I want it to be you because you will be fair-minded and you will show, ambiguities where there is one. And I think it's a very good takeaway also for people who are trying to, break into tech. We have listeners who are new to the business, who are entrants, who are looking for
Mm,
mentorship, who are looking for a break, to stand out. That yes, jargon is very important at the beginning to show that you've done your reading, that you understand what the terminology is. But then for creative thinking, it's not like a forever. Like you don't really sit
mhm.
around. Like if you sit with a VC and he says synergy, you leave. So it's
Yeah.
not like, after a while you can drop them, but it's important to do your homework at the beginning. Because that's how people, even for people who went to Stanford, that's a kind of like checking or vetting of a person.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Well, thank you so much for having me on. This has been really fun.
Thank you for being here. And thanks for everybody who was watching and listening to us.